Tell me if this sounds familiar. You open your fridge, find last night's dinner. Maybe it's a nice plate of rice, some spinach curry, or even leftover chicken, and without giving it much thought, you pop it into the microwave or warm it up on the stove. Quick, easy, practical. And let's be honest, who wants to cook from scratch every single day, especially in your 60s, 70s, or 80s? You've earned the right to take shortcuts. But what if I told you that one of the most common innocent kitchen habits, reheating a certain type of food, might be putting your brain, heart, and entire circulation system in real danger? Not over decades, but literally overnight. I'm talking about stroke risk. I'm talking about something that can steal your independence, your memory, even your ability to speak, all from a food you've likely been warming up for years without ever knowing what it could do to you. I'm Dr. Linda Rose, and I've spent over 30 years helping older adults stay sharp, mobile, and full of life. And I'm not here to scare you. I'm here because I care. My patients, people just like you, many of them parents, grandparents, even great-grandparents, often come to me feeling frustrated. They say things like, "Dr. Rose, I eat healthy, I walk daily, I take my blood pressure pills. So why did this happen?" And sometimes the answer isn't a pill. It isn't even aging. It's something in the kitchen, something they never suspected. I want to make something very clear. You deserve to enjoy food. You deserve to feel safe in your own home. But certain reheated foods, yes, even healthy ones, can chemically change in ways that trigger inflammation, clotting, and artery damage. And when those changes happen, especially in older bodies with slower digestion and more fragile vessels, the result can be dangerous. And that's why I'm so passionate about today's video. Because most people, even younger adults, have no idea this is happening. And for seniors, it can be life-altering. I've seen people in their 60s and 70s go from perfectly stable one day to struggling with speech or memory the next, all because of a chain reaction that began with something as simple as a meal. We'll get into the exact food in just a moment, and why reheating it, especially in certain ways, creates toxic compounds that harm the blood and the brain. And no, this isn't one of those overhyped food trends or fear-based internet rumors. This is real, peer-reviewed science. And it's something I talk about with every single one of my senior patients. Here's the good news. Once you understand which food is the problem, and how to handle it safely, you can take back control. This isn't about avoiding all leftovers. It's about being smart. And once you learn this, you can pass it on to your spouse, your children, and even your grandchildren. You could be the reason someone you love avoids a stroke years down the road. That's powerful. So why don't we hear more about this in mainstream advice for seniors? Because most nutrition tips focus on calories, cholesterol, and sugar. And yes, those matter. But when it comes to brain health, especially protecting your brain from sudden, severe damage like a stroke, we have to think deeper. We have to think about how food interacts with our aging cells, our circulation, and our daily habits. What worked in your 40s may now be doing quiet harm in your 70s. And once you understand that shift, you can start making choices that protect you, without sacrificing flavor, convenience, or joy. Today, we'll dive into exactly which food you should never reheat, especially if you're over 60, and what safer alternatives exist. I'll also explain how reheating triggers something called nitrosamine formation, why that's bad news for older arteries, and how it links to blood pressure spikes, clotting, and silent inflammation, key drivers of stroke and memory loss. This might be one of the most important health videos you watch all year, not because it's dramatic, but because it's practical. And practical knowledge, especially for older adults, is the first step towards staying independent, mobile, and mentally clear. Before we get started, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell, so you never miss a simple, science-backed health tip, designed especially for older adults like you. If you find this video helpful, type 1 in the comments. If not, type 0. Your feedback is invaluable and helps me improve these videos for your benefit. Now, let's begin. Point 1. The reheated food that raises stroke risk overnight. Rice. Let me begin by saying this. I used to tell my patients to eat more rice. It's affordable, easy to digest, and familiar to so many of us. Whether it's part of your lunch, dinner, or the base of a comforting casserole, rice is often a staple in the homes of older adults. But what if I told you that reheated rice, yes, just rice, could silently raise your risk of stroke? I know it sounds dramatic, but I want you to understand why. You see, the danger isn't in the rice itself. Freshly cooked rice, when eaten right away, is generally harmless. But the moment it's left out at room temperature and later reheated, a chain reaction begins. There's a bacteria called Bacillus cereus that can survive the cooking process. When rice is cooled too slowly or left out too long, this bacteria begins to multiply and produces toxins that are not destroyed by reheating. That means even if you heat it piping hot, the damage is already done. Now, how does this connect to stroke risk, especially in your 60s, 70s, and beyond? Well, the toxins produced by this bacteria can cause inflammation in the gut. And that inflammation doesn't just stay in your digestive tract, it spreads through the bloodstream. Over time, it can damage the delicate lining of your arteries, including those leading to your brain. When that damage combines with existing risks like high blood pressure, slow circulation, or medication side effects, it becomes a perfect storm for stroke. Here's the part many doctors don't mention. As we age, our immune systems weaken, our digestive processes slow down, and our vascular systems become more fragile. That means toxins we might have tolerated in our 30s now affect us differently. What would have caused a mild stomach upset in your 40s could now lead to increased blood pressure, sudden dizziness, or even a mini-stroke after 60. I've had patients who thought they were experiencing food poisoning, only to later discover the episode triggered a blood clot or short-term memory loss. I had one gentleman in his early 70s. Let's call him Mr. Patel. He lived alone after his wife passed and often reheated rice from big batches he made once a week. One day he came in complaining of nausea, weakness on one side of his body, and trouble focusing. At first, he thought it was just fatigue. But after some tests, we discovered he'd experienced a transient ischemic attack, a warning stroke. He hadn't changed his medication, his activity levels were steady, and nothing else had shifted. The only difference? He'd been eating reheated rice that had been sitting in the fridge for 3 days. Once we changed that one habit, his symptoms didn't return. This is not an isolated case. In fact, in warmer climates or during hot summer months, leftover rice that is stored improperly becomes a common cause of gastrointestinal distress. But in seniors, that distress can quickly become neurological if other risk factors are present. This is why I always advise my older patients, if you're going to eat rice, either eat it fresh, or cool and store it immediately in small airtight containers. And if it's more than 1 day old, toss it. Your brain is worth more than a spoonful of leftovers. Another thing to keep in mind is how you reheat the rice. Microwaving it unevenly often leaves cold spots where bacteria can survive. Stirring and thoroughly reheating on the stovetop is better, but even then, you're still dealing with toxins that may already be present if the rice wasn't stored properly. The safest habit is simple. Make smaller batches, refrigerate them within an hour of cooking, and only reheat rice once. Never reheat it twice. Now, some people ask me, Dr. Rose, what if I freeze it? Freezing does slow down bacterial growth dramatically. But the moment thawed rice is left at room temperature, even for a short time, the same risks apply. It's all about timing and temperature. If in doubt, throw it out. Your brain and your heart will thank you. I know rice may seem like a small thing, but stroke isn't a small issue. A stroke can rob you of your memory, your ability to walk, your independence. And if you can avoid even one risk factor, especially something as simple as reheating rice the wrong way, it's a step toward protecting everything you've worked so hard for. You deserve to enjoy meals that are both comforting and safe. So my advice: cook what you need. Store it safely. And don't let convenience rob you of clarity. Your brain is your most valuable asset. Don't risk it over a bowl of leftovers. Point 2. Why reheating spinach can be dangerous for older adults. Now let's talk about a food that's often labeled as a superfood, spinach. It's packed with iron, folate, fiber, and powerful antioxidants. I've recommended spinach for decades because it supports everything from bone strength to circulation. But when it comes to reheating spinach, especially for those of you in your 60s, 70s, or 80s, there's a hidden danger that's not talked about enough, and it's something I take very seriously as a brain and vascular health specialist. The issue with reheating spinach lies in a compound it contains naturally: nitrates. When you cook spinach, it's completely safe to eat. But when you store it and later reheat it, especially in a microwave or at high temperatures, those healthy nitrates can chemically transform into something far more harmful: nitrites and nitrosamines. These compounds have been linked to oxidative stress, inflammation, and even the hardening of arteries. All of these can significantly increase your stroke risk, particularly in older adults who already have narrowed blood vessels or elevated blood pressure. Let me explain how this works in your body. Nitrites can interact with the hemoglobin in your blood, the very substance that carries oxygen to your brain and tissues. When this interaction occurs, it creates a form of hemoglobin that can't carry oxygen effectively. The result: less oxygen to your brain, slower cognitive function, and in more severe cases, increased risk of ischemic events, what we commonly know as strokes. You may be thinking, Dr. Rose, I've eaten spinach for years without a problem. And I hear you. But age changes everything. As we get older, our detox systems slow down. The liver doesn't neutralize toxins as quickly. Our blood vessels lose elasticity, making them more sensitive to changes in circulation. Even small amounts of oxidative stress, like those created by reheated nitrites, can have a bigger impact now than they would have 20 or 30 years ago. I had a patient named Sylvia, a retired teacher in her late 60s. She was committed to her health. She walked daily, avoided sugar, and had spinach almost every other day in salads, omelets, and soups. But over time, she began experiencing strange episodes: mild confusion, dizziness, and headaches. She chalked it up to fatigue, but as her symptoms progressed, she came in to see me. After some testing, we discovered that her blood oxygen levels were dipping slightly after meals, especially when she ate leftovers. She had been reheating spinach and storing it in her fridge for 3 to 4 days at a time. Once we removed that habit, the symptoms disappeared within a week. What made the difference wasn't the spinach, it was the way she was handling and reheating it. Spinach is incredibly sensitive to time and temperature. When stored in the fridge, nitrates begin to break down slowly. When reheated, especially in a microwave, those breakdown products accelerate. They become unstable and, unfortunately, toxic to our aging brains and hearts. Here's my advice to all my patients: if you love spinach, and many of you do, enjoy it fresh. If you're making a soup or casserole that includes spinach, add the spinach near the end of cooking, and eat it the same day. If you must store leftovers, remove the spinach portion and keep it separate. That way, you can add fresh spinach when reheating the next day. This little change can go a long way in reducing your exposure to nitrosamines and improving your long-term cognitive health. Another tip I share is to avoid microwaving spinach altogether. If you're reheating a dish with spinach, do it on the stovetop over low to medium heat, and stir frequently. This ensures more even heating and lowers the risk of overheating the nitrates. Even better, use fresh greens. Many grocery stores now offer pre-washed spinach that you can toss into a hot dish just before serving. That way, you get the nutrients, texture, and flavor, without the toxic transformation. Some people wonder, why isn't this more widely discussed? And the answer is, most food safety guidelines are written for the general population, not for seniors. But the truth is, what's safe for a 30-year-old may not be safe for someone over 70. As a doctor who works with older adults every day, it's my responsibility to raise these kinds of red flags, especially when the solution is so simple. Think about it this way. Your brain has been there for you through every chapter of your life. Raising kids, facing challenges, building memories. Doesn't it deserve your protection now? If all it takes is avoiding reheated spinach, or handling it more carefully, to reduce your risk of stroke, Isn't that a change worth making? You're not giving anything up. You're choosing to be wise. You're choosing to respect the beautiful, complex system that is your aging body. And let me tell you, your body will thank you. Your energy will improve. Your clarity will return. And you'll be far less likely to find yourself in the hospital for something that could have been prevented. So yes, spinach is still a superfood. But only when handled with a super smart approach. Point 3. Reheating eggs, a silent threat to your brain and arteries. Eggs are one of the most beloved foods for older adults, and for good reason. They're packed with protein, essential vitamins like B12, healthy fats, and they're easy to prepare. Whether it's a simple boiled egg, a veggie omelette, or scrambled eggs for breakfast, many of my patients in their 60s, 70s, and even 80s have made eggs a regular part of their diet. And normally, I support that. When eggs are fresh, they're incredibly nourishing. But the problem comes when eggs are reheated, especially if they've already been cooked and then sat in the fridge for a day or two. This is one of the lesser-known food habits that can quietly increase stroke risk, particularly in aging bodies where circulation is slower and arteries are more vulnerable. Let me explain why. Eggs are rich in proteins and fats. When you cook them, those proteins change structure. That's a natural and healthy part of cooking. But when you reheat already cooked eggs, especially in a microwave or at high heat, the proteins go through a second transformation. This process is called protein oxidation, and it creates compounds that are not easily digested by your body. More importantly, these oxidized proteins can cause inflammation in the lining of your blood vessels, which directly increases your risk of blood clots and strokes. Now, let's add one more layer. Many older adults already deal with elevated cholesterol, blood pressure issues, or take medications that affect blood flow and clotting. When you introduce oxidized proteins into the body, it becomes harder for the arteries to remain flexible. The result: higher plaque formation, stiffer arteries, and a greater risk of ischemic stroke, where a blood clot blocks oxygen to the brain. I remember one of my patients, Harold, who was 76 and lived alone. He would cook a batch of scrambled eggs in the morning, eat half, and save the rest for the next day. He thought he was being efficient, and honestly, I admire that kind of planning. But after months of doing this, he started experiencing strange symptoms. His blood pressure became more erratic. He had moments of blurred vision and short-term confusion. We ran a series of tests, and while he didn't have a major stroke, he had suffered what we call microvascular ischemia, tiny strokes that often go unnoticed but still damage the brain over time. When we reviewed his diet, reheated eggs were the one common thread. Once we switched him to freshly cooked eggs, his symptoms started to stabilize. And while we can't say the eggs were the only cause, the science supports this connection. Another factor is how we reheat eggs. Microwaves are convenient, but they heat unevenly. That means some parts of the egg are overcooked while others remain cool, creating inconsistent texture and more chemical breakdown. The high heat from microwaving further encourages the development of advanced glycation end products, or AGEs. These compounds contribute to cellular aging, inflammation, and vascular damage, all of which are major contributors to stroke and heart disease in older adults. So what's the solution? Do you have to stop eating eggs entirely? Absolutely not. I still recommend eggs to most of my senior patients. But here's what I advise. Cook what you'll eat fresh. If you're in the habit of making a large batch, consider switching to small portions cooked on the spot. Scrambled eggs or boiled eggs only take a few minutes, and it's a few minutes that could protect your brain. If you must store leftover eggs, eat them cold rather than reheating them. For example, slice a boiled egg into a salad or mash it for a sandwich. Cold eggs do not go through the damaging reheating process and are safer than reheating, especially in a microwave. Also, avoid storing cooked egg dishes, like quiches, casseroles, or breakfast sandwiches, for more than one day. The longer they sit, the more opportunity there is for oxidation, bacterial growth, and structural protein damage. And lastly, watch how long cooked eggs sit at room temperature. After cooking, refrigerate them within 1 hour. Leaving eggs out longer allows bacteria like salmonella to grow, which poses another risk for seniors with weakened immune systems. Some people ask, Dr. Rose, how serious is this really? I've been eating reheated eggs for years. And I always say, this isn't about panic. It's about cumulative risk. One reheated egg won't cause a stroke. But if your arteries are already under pressure, due to genetics, age, or lifestyle, then every little bit matters. Why take the risk when the solution is so simple? Eggs should support your health, not threaten it. And with a few thoughtful changes, you can still enjoy every bite safely. Remember, your brain is made up of delicate blood vessels that need clean, unobstructed flow to function properly. Protecting that flow is one of the most important things you can do for your independence, your memory, and your overall vitality. So tomorrow morning, when you crack open that egg, take an extra moment. Cook it fresh. Give your body the best chance to thrive. You've worked hard your whole life. Don't let convenience rob you of your clarity, your strength, or your future. Point 4. Reheating potatoes. The hidden stroke risk you've never considered. Potatoes are one of the most comforting, satisfying, and familiar foods we enjoy, especially in our golden years. Whether it's mashed, baked, roasted, or turned into a hearty soup, potatoes are a staple in many households. And truthfully, when they're prepared the right way, they're absolutely fine. But today, I want to talk to you about the surprising danger of reheating potatoes. A danger that could increase your risk of stroke in ways you've likely never imagined. You see, potatoes are high in starch, which by itself isn't harmful. But the issue starts when you cook potatoes and then let them cool, particularly if they're left out at room temperature for more than a short period. Just like rice, cooked potatoes are highly vulnerable to contamination from a type of bacteria called Clostridium botulinum, which can survive in oxygen-deprived environments like foil-wrapped baked potatoes or airtight containers. If that bacteria starts to grow, it can produce toxins that are not always destroyed by reheating, especially when the reheating is uneven or incomplete, such as what happens in many microwave ovens. But the risk doesn't stop at food poisoning. When potatoes are improperly stored and reheated, their starches can turn into resistant starches, which behave very differently in the body. These resistant starches can cause sudden spikes in insulin, gut inflammation, and disruptions to the delicate balance of bacteria in your digestive system. And when the gut is inflamed, it sends stress signals through your bloodstream, which, over time, leads to inflammation in your arteries and your brain. For seniors, this low-level inflammation can silently raise blood pressure and impair circulation, two of the biggest risk factors for stroke. Let me share a story. One of my longtime patients, Miriam, who is 71, had a habit of making large batches of mashed potatoes on Sunday and reheating them throughout the week. She would keep them in a sealed container in the fridge and heat them in the microwave, sometimes even more than once if they weren't hot enough. Over time, she began noticing strange symptoms: blurred vision, mild confusion after eating, and even numbness in her fingers. Initially, she thought it was just fatigue or stress. But after a few episodes, we did a full evaluation. She hadn't had a major stroke, but she'd suffered a series of small, silent strokes, also known as lacunar infarcts. What we traced it back to shocked her, and me. Her diet was mostly healthy, but the pattern of repeatedly reheating potatoes, combined with her slightly elevated blood pressure and slow digestion, created the perfect storm. Once she switched to preparing smaller portions and stopped reheating her starchy foods, her symptoms stopped progressing. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not here to demonize potatoes. They contain potassium, vitamin C, and fiber when eaten in a balanced way. But as a brain and vascular doctor, I have to be honest with you. Reheating cooked potatoes, especially more than once, and storing them in sealed foil or airtight plastic without cooling them rapidly, can raise your risk of foodborne toxins and vascular inflammation. Here's what I recommend if you love potatoes. First, cook only what you'll eat that day. I know batch cooking seems smart, but it's not worth the risk if you're going to be eating leftovers 3 days later. If you must cook a larger amount, cool them quickly after cooking, within an hour, and store them in shallow containers, not foil. This prevents bacteria like Clostridium botulinum from multiplying. Second, when reheating potatoes, avoid the microwave unless you're sure the food is being heated evenly. The best method is to reheat on the stovetop or in the oven, where you can stir or check for even heat. Make sure it reaches at least 165 degrees Fahrenheit throughout. Don't just warm it, reheat it thoroughly. Third, never reheat potatoes more than once. Every time you reheat and cool them again, the risk of forming resistant starches and feeding bacterial growth increases. For someone in their 30s, that might mean a little stomach discomfort. But for you, it could quietly lead to arterial stress, clotting, and, yes, an increased chance of stroke. A common question I hear is, Dr. Rose, what about cold potato salad or chilled potatoes? Great question. Cold potatoes, when prepared properly and cooled quickly, can actually lower blood sugar response. It's the repeated reheating process and the poor storage methods that are the problem. So if you love cold potato dishes, go ahead. Just be careful about the timing and temperature during storage. Another hidden concern? Processed potato foods, like fries or hash browns, that are cooked in vegetable oils, then stored, and later reheated. These are double trouble. Not only do they carry the starch risks we discussed, but also contain oxidized fats, which promote inflammation and damage your vascular walls from the inside out. That's another reason I strongly urge you to limit processed reheated potato snacks, especially the frozen ones. At the end of the day, it's not about avoiding potatoes. It's about understanding the risks of what happens to them once they're cooked, cooled, and heated again. These little habits add up. One bowl of reheated mashed potatoes won't cause a stroke, but if your arteries are already narrowed, if your blood pressure's a little high, and your circulation is sluggish, these small stressors become much bigger over time. Your brain is like a beautiful orchestra. It needs steady blood flow, oxygen, and harmony between every part. Don't let a leftover side dish interrupt the music. Cook fresh, store smart, and reheat with care. Point 5. Reheating chicken. A hidden trigger for artery and brain damage. Chicken is often considered one of the healthiest sources of protein, especially for older adults. It's lean, versatile, and easy to prepare. Many of my patients in their 60s, 70s, and 80s rely on it as a go-to option for lunch or dinner. And I agree, when it's cooked and eaten fresh, chicken can absolutely support healthy aging, strong muscles, and balanced energy. But the moment you start reheating cooked chicken, especially more than once or at high temperatures, that same healthy food can quickly become a silent risk to your brain, heart, and circulation. Let me explain why this happens. Chicken is rich in protein, but also in polyunsaturated fats, particularly if you're eating darker cuts like thighs or legs. When chicken is cooked the first time, the proteins and fats undergo a natural transformation. But when you reheat it, especially in a microwave or on high heat, the proteins become denatured again, and the fats begin to oxidize. This oxidation process creates compounds called lipid peroxides, which are toxic to the lining of your blood vessels. Now you may be wondering, so what if my blood vessels get irritated a little? Here's the concern: when your arteries are already aging, perhaps a little stiff from high blood pressure, or narrowed due to cholesterol, these tiny irritants can add up. They cause inflammation inside the vessels, making it easier for plaque to stick, and harder for blood to flow freely. And where is that blood trying to go? Your brain. When flow is reduced or a clot forms, that's when a stroke happens. It may be small at first, confusion, slurred speech, dizziness, but in many cases, those are the early warnings of a much more serious episode. I remember one of my patients, Walter, who was 79 and living with his daughter. She loved meal prepping chicken dishes at the beginning of the week. Chicken stir-fry, grilled breasts, baked thighs, and stored them in the fridge to make meals easier. Walter was reheating the same pieces of chicken 2 or even 3 times throughout the week. Over the months, he started experiencing what he called off days. His words felt jumbled. He couldn't concentrate. And then one morning, he collapsed. Fortunately, his daughter recognized the symptoms and got him help in time. He had suffered a mild stroke, a wake-up call. When we looked at his lifestyle, his exercise and medications hadn't changed. His blood pressure was mostly under control. But his diet had quietly shifted, and it was the reheating pattern that stood out. Once we stopped that cycle, and encouraged freshly prepared proteins in smaller portions, his energy and focus began to return. Now, let's talk about how the chicken is reheated. Microwaving, which many seniors rely on, is especially problematic. It heats food unevenly, leaving parts scalding hot while other sections remain undercooked. This inconsistency not only affects the flavor and texture, it allows bacteria like Campylobacter and Salmonella, which may have survived the original cooking or formed during cooling, to persist. These bacteria can cause serious gut infections in older adults with weakened immune systems. And again, gut inflammation is closely tied to vascular inflammation, which increases your risk of both stroke and heart attacks. Another concern is reheating fried or breaded chicken. These versions contain oils and flours that, when reheated, become a source of trans fats and harmful compounds known as AGEs, advanced glycation end products. These chemicals trigger inflammation and oxidative stress throughout the body, and the brain is especially sensitive to that kind of damage. So, what should you do instead? First, if you enjoy chicken, continue to eat it, but cook only what you'll eat in one sitting. A small, fresh portion is always better than a large leftover plate. It may take a few more minutes, but it's a few minutes that can protect your clarity, mobility, and independence. Second, if you do need to store chicken, do so in shallow containers and refrigerate it immediately, within 1 hour of cooking. This prevents bacterial growth during the cooling phase. Third, only reheat chicken once. Every additional reheating increases protein and fat oxidation. And never leave cooked chicken sitting out on the counter after reheating. It should be eaten right away. Also, if you're reheating chicken, avoid the microwave when possible. Reheat gently on the stove or in the oven at a low, even temperature. Stir or flip the pieces regularly to ensure thorough heating. And always bring it to at least 165 degrees Fahrenheit throughout. Use a food thermometer if you're unsure. Many seniors unknowingly underheat leftovers and increase their risk of bacterial contamination. For seniors who struggle with energy or arthritis and feel like cooking fresh chicken is too much effort, consider alternatives like canned tuna, soft-boiled eggs, or beans, which are easier to prepare fresh and don't carry the same reheating risks. Your body deserves nourishment without compromise. It's easy to think, I've been reheating chicken for years and nothing happened. But our bodies change. What didn't harm you in your 40s might affect you deeply in your 70s. Stroke is not always sudden. It's often the result of many small, repeated stresses on the vascular system. And yes, something as simple as the way we handle leftover chicken can be one of them. Your brain is a masterpiece. It holds your memories, your personality, your wisdom. Let's protect it, not just with medicine, but with the little daily decisions that add up to lasting wellness. Choose fresh. Reheat wisely. And never underestimate the power of one mindful change. Point 6. The shocking truth about reheated oil. A stroke risk hiding in plain sight. Let's talk about something that's in almost every kitchen. Cooking oil. Whether it's vegetable oil, canola, sunflower, or even olive oil, we use it daily. For frying eggs, sautéing vegetables, or baking casseroles. And if you're like most of my senior patients, you probably reuse oil from time to time. Maybe you fry something and save the oil for later, or heat up a dish that was cooked in oil the day before. It seems harmless. In fact, it may even feel thrifty or practical. But what I've discovered, and what science clearly shows, is that reheating oil, or eating foods cooked in reheated oil, can be incredibly dangerous for your brain, your heart, and your arteries. As a brain doctor, this is one of the most overlooked but powerful risks I talk to my patients about, especially those over 60. You see, when oil is heated the first time, it begins to break down. This is true even for healthy oils like olive oil. When you heat it again, during reheating or frying, it degrades further and releases harmful substances known as lipid peroxides, free radicals, and trans fats. These toxic byproducts travel through your bloodstream, triggering widespread inflammation and oxidative stress. Now you may be wondering, so what? Isn't that the same as eating a little fried food? The difference lies in how unstable and reactive these compounds become after multiple heating cycles. They directly damage the delicate inner lining of your arteries, especially the ones leading to your brain. Over time, this promotes plaque buildup, narrowing of the vessels, and clot formation, all of which are leading causes of ischemic stroke, which occurs when blood can't reach part of your brain. For older adults, especially those with hypertension, diabetes, or who take blood-thinning medications, this damage happens faster and with greater consequences. I've seen patients who had clean eating habits but unknowingly cooked their vegetables in reheated oils. When they experienced brain fog, elevated blood pressure, or in some cases, mini-strokes, the oil was the missing link in the puzzle. One of my patients, Mrs. Florence, was 81 and sharp as a tack. She loved cooking for herself and would fry vegetables in canola oil, strain it, and reuse it for 2 or 3 meals. She believed she was being smart, saving money and reducing waste. But over time, she began feeling weak on one side, and she once lost her balance getting out of bed. We did a full vascular scan, and it showed significant narrowing in the carotid arteries, the ones supplying her brain. Once we stopped the reheating oil cycle and cleaned up her fats, her clarity and strength returned within weeks. That's the power of awareness. Another sneaky habit is reheating leftover oily foods, like stir-fries, curries, and deep-fried snacks. Even if the food isn't greasy, if oil was used in cooking and is reheated the next day, the breakdown continues. Worse still is using vegetable or seed oils like soybean, corn, or sunflower. These are high in omega-6 fats that become pro-inflammatory when repeatedly heated. That inflammation affects your whole body, but your brain and heart suffer the most. So what should you do if you love cooking with oil? You don't need to give it up entirely. But here's what I recommend. First, cook with stable oils like extra virgin olive oil, avocado oil, or ghee, but only once. Avoid reusing oil, especially if it has already been exposed to high heat. Throw it away after one use. Your arteries are worth far more than a spoonful of used oil. Second, if you're reheating food that was cooked in oil, try not to use high heat. Gently warm it at low temperature, or better yet, eat it cold if appropriate. For example, a cold roasted veggie salad with olive oil dressing is safer than refrying roasted veggies from the night before. Third, avoid eating out at places that reuse oil. Many restaurants, especially fast food chains, reuse frying oil all day. This is especially harmful for seniors with fragile arteries. Limit fried foods to once in a while, and when you do indulge, make sure it's freshly made, not double or triple fried. And if you enjoy baking, be mindful of dishes like muffins or cakes that were baked with oil and then reheated. The heating process in the oven can still cause oil oxidation, especially with vegetable-based oils. I always recommend baking in small batches and eating fresh where possible. Now let's address a common myth. But Dr. Rose, I use air fryers. Isn't that safe? Air fryers can be a healthier alternative, especially because they use less oil. But be cautious. If you coat your food in oil before air frying and then reheat that same food later, you're still exposing the oil to multiple rounds of heat. The risk doesn't come from how much oil you use, but how many times it's heated. I don't expect you to remember every detail, but here's the golden rule I tell all my patients. When in doubt, throw the oil out. Your memory, your mobility, and your mind are too valuable to gamble on a teaspoon of reused fat. You've made it through decades of hard work, caregiving, and life lessons. Now is the time to treat your brain with the care it deserves. And sometimes, that care means letting go of old habits, even the ones that feel harmless. You're not being wasteful. You're being wise. And wisdom is the gift of aging. Point 7. Microwaving plastic containers. The silent stroke trigger in your kitchen. Now let me ask you something personal. Have you ever microwaved leftovers in a plastic container? Maybe an old takeout tub, a deli meat container, or even a reusable food storage box that's been around for years. I understand how convenient it is, You pop the lid, place it in the microwave, and hit the button. No extra dishes, no mess. It feels like a harmless shortcut. But what if I told you this one small habit, repeated over time, could silently increase your stroke risk overnight? As a brain doctor, this is one of the most misunderstood dangers I see in everyday kitchens, especially among older adults. Microwaving food in plastic containers, especially those not labeled microwave safe, causes toxic chemicals like BPA, phthalates, and dioxins to leach directly into your food. These chemicals are invisible, tasteless, and odorless. You'd never know they're there. But once inside your body, they do serious harm. Let me explain how it affects your brain and your blood vessels. These chemicals are known as endocrine disruptors, which means they interfere with your natural hormones. For seniors, this is especially dangerous. As you age, your body becomes more sensitive to hormonal imbalances, especially those affecting blood pressure regulation, cholesterol levels, and inflammation. BPA and other plasticizers mimic estrogen and disrupt your vascular tone, making your arteries stiffer and more prone to clot formation. In fact, a growing body of research shows that long-term exposure to these chemicals contributes to atherosclerosis, which is the hardening and narrowing of arteries. This alone raises your stroke risk. But what's even more shocking is how these chemicals damage the blood-brain barrier, the thin, protective layer that keeps harmful substances out of your brain. Once that barrier is weakened, your brain becomes vulnerable to toxins, inflammation, and oxidative stress. The result: brain fog, poor memory, and in severe cases, stroke. Now, I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to empower you. Because this is one of the easiest habits to change. Just yesterday, I had a 75-year-old patient named Mr. Camille who told me proudly, "Dr. Rose, I eat healthy. I eat lots of home-cooked meals and no junk food." But when I asked how he reheated those meals, he said he used the same plastic container for months, sometimes even containers from yogurt and margarine. He had no idea that each time he microwaved his food, he was exposing himself to neurotoxic chemicals. We made one simple change: switching to glass containers. Within weeks, his blood pressure normalized, his sleep improved, and he felt clearer-headed. The science backs this up. A study published in Environmental Health Perspectives found that even BPA-free plastics can leach hormone-disrupting chemicals when heated. And here's the kicker: the older the plastic container, the more likely it is to degrade and release toxins into your food. That means the longer you've had it, the more dangerous it becomes. So what's the safest option? I always tell my patients, switch to glass or ceramic containers. They don't release toxins, they don't warp in the microwave, and they're long-lasting. You can find affordable sets almost anywhere now. Even Pyrex or old-fashioned glass bowls work beautifully. If you need a lid, use a ceramic plate or paper towel to cover it instead of plastic wrap. Another tip: if you must use plastic, never microwave it, even if it says, microwave safe. That label only means the container won't melt. It doesn't guarantee safety from chemical leaching. The risk to your arteries and your brain is simply not worth it. Let's also talk about takeout food. Many times, your food arrives in a plastic or foam container. You're hungry, so you just pop it in the microwave as is. Please don't. Foam containers especially are made from polystyrene, which can release styrene, a suspected carcinogen and neurotoxin, when heated. Always transfer takeout to a safe dish before reheating. I know many seniors live alone, and convenience becomes a top priority. I truly understand that. But convenience should never come at the cost of your brain's health. It's not about doing everything perfectly. It's about being mindful of the small choices that add up over time. Microwaving plastic is one of those quiet habits that seem harmless but chip away at your health little by little. I often remind my viewers, your body is already doing its best to age gracefully. Don't make its job harder with toxic shortcuts. The stroke that takes your independence or steals your clarity often doesn't announce itself. It builds silently through everyday habits like this. But the good news is, when you make small upgrades, like switching from plastic to glass, you tip the odds back in your favor. You start protecting your brain instead of putting it at risk. So please, next time you're reheating that delicious meal, take the extra 10 seconds to transfer it to a glass dish. It may seem like a small act, but I assure you, it's one of the most protective steps you can take for your brain health, your arterial health, and your overall vitality. Because you deserve a sharp mind. You deserve many more years of memories, laughter, and independence. And sometimes, all it takes is saying goodbye to that old plastic container sitting in your cupboard. Point 8. Reheating meat sauces, a dangerous brew for your brain and arteries. Here's something most people never think twice about. Let's say you made a delicious beef stew or spaghetti bolognese a few nights ago. Maybe your grandkids were visiting, or you made a big batch for the week. And now, it's sitting in the fridge, ready to be reheated. Sounds harmless, right? But here's what you may not realize. Reheating meat-based sauces, especially ones that contain beef, pork, or even chicken with thick gravies, can silently increase your risk of stroke overnight, particularly as you get into your 60s, 70s, and beyond. Let me explain why this matters so much more as you age. As a brain doctor, I always emphasize that stroke is not just about blood pressure. It's also deeply tied to inflammation, cholesterol buildup, and impaired blood flow. And meat-based sauces, especially when they've been cooked, cooled, and reheated, undergo a series of chemical changes that can be damaging to your cardiovascular and neurological systems. Here's how it works. When you initially cook meat, especially fatty cuts, you create a complex mixture of proteins, fats, and flavors. All delicious. But once that meat cools down and is stored in the refrigerator, the fats begin to solidify and oxidize, especially if you're not storing it properly. Now, when you reheat that sauce the next day, or even 2 or 3 days later, those oxidized fats don't go away. In fact, they can become even more toxic to your cells. These oxidized fats produce something called lipid peroxides, unstable molecules that trigger inflammation in the body. And not just anywhere. Inflammation in your blood vessels, in your brain tissue, and in the very arteries that feed oxygen to your brain. That's the first danger. The second is a compound called nitrosamine, which can form when meat is cooked and then reheated, especially in sauces containing nitrates or processed meats like sausage, bacon bits, or ground meat that isn't freshly ground. Nitrosamines are strongly linked to neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, but also to vascular dementia and, yes, stroke. You see, every time you reheat meat-based sauces in the microwave or on the stovetop, especially if it's been sitting for a couple of days, you're creating a perfect storm. Oxidized cholesterol, degraded proteins, and hidden inflammatory triggers that your aging body simply cannot process as efficiently as it used to. Let me share the story of one of my patients, Mrs. Yasmin. She's a wonderful 72-year-old grandmother who makes a fantastic lamb curry that her whole family loves. She used to cook a huge pot on Sundays and reheat portions every day of the week. But she came to me complaining of brain fog, dizziness, and high blood pressure. After some digging, I found that it wasn't her main meals. It was the habit of reheating fatty, meat-based sauces daily that was contributing to her vascular stress. We modified her cooking routine. Smaller batches, leaner cuts, and limiting how many times she reheated the same dish. Within 3 months, her blood pressure stabilized, her energy improved, and she felt like herself again. So, what's the solution? Do you need to give up your favorite stews and sauces? Not at all. Here's what I advise. First, try to cook smaller portions if you can. I know it's tempting to batch cook, especially when energy is limited, but cooking smaller, fresher portions reduces the need for repeated reheating. Second, if you do cook a large batch, divide it into single-serving containers and freeze them immediately after cooling. That way, you only reheat what you need, and you reduce the chance of multiple reheat cycles. Freezing slows the breakdown of fats and proteins and preserves nutrients better than refrigeration. Third, reheat thoroughly, but gently. Use the stovetop instead of the microwave when you can. Microwaves tend to heat unevenly, leaving cold spots where bacteria can thrive, or overheating other areas, which accelerates fat oxidation. Fourth, consider using leaner meats like turkey or chicken breast in your sauces. And try replacing some meat with fiber-rich lentils, beans, or mushrooms, which are gentler on your arteries and still add great texture and flavor. And finally, be especially cautious with sauces that have cream, butter, or rich oils in them. These fats are more prone to oxidation and can strain your digestive system and arteries as you get older. Remember, as you age, your body's ability to handle toxins, oxidized fats, and chemical byproducts decreases. Your liver doesn't detoxify as fast, your arteries aren't as elastic, and your brain is more vulnerable to oxidative stress. That means you must be even more selective about what you reintroduce into your body. Every meal is a chance to either nourish or inflame. Reheated meat sauces may seem like an innocent comfort food, but for someone in their 60s or 70s, they can be a quiet saboteur. My goal isn't to take the joy out of food, it's to protect the joy of clear thinking, stable balance, and a life free from the shadow of stroke. So next time you're about to reheat that beef stew or creamy meat sauce, pause for a moment. Ask yourself, is this helping my brain or hurting it? That simple awareness can change your health trajectory in profound ways. Let me close today's conversation with something deeply personal from my heart to yours. I know it's not always easy to hear that the foods we've enjoyed and trusted for decades could be quietly working against us. Especially something as common and comforting as reheated leftovers. I get it. It can feel overwhelming to constantly adjust your routine. But here's the truth I want you to hold on to. Small, thoughtful changes can protect your brain, your heart, and your independence more than any pill ever could. As a brain doctor, I've seen firsthand what stroke can do to someone's life. It can steal your memory, your ability to speak, your balance, even your sense of who you are. And too often, I've sat across from patients who said, "Doctor, I wish someone had told me this sooner." That's why I'm here. Not to scare you, but to empower you. Because the real tragedy isn't that stroke happens. It's that so much of it is preventable, especially when it comes to inflammation, circulation, and what we put on our plates. Now, let me be crystal clear. I'm not telling you to throw out your favorite recipes or live in fear of food. I'm asking you to become more aware, more selective, and more strategic. Reheating certain foods, especially the ones we covered today, can quietly sabotage your health over time. But now you know. And when you know better, you can do better. Think of your brain and blood vessels like a delicate garden. Every meal you eat is either watering that garden or pouring in toxins. It's either feeding clarity, balance, and vitality, or stirring up inflammation, confusion, and risk. And you, my friend, have the power to choose. So here's what I encourage you to do from this day forward. Start with one change. Maybe it's cutting back on reheating oily meats. Maybe it's storing leftovers differently. Maybe it's paying closer attention to what happens in your microwave. One change. That's it. Over time, those tiny steps build momentum. They build confidence. And most importantly, they build protection for your future. If you're in your 60s, 70s, or 80s right now, I want you to know, it's not too late. Your body is still listening. Your brain is still adapting. Your health is still yours to shape. You can reduce your stroke risk. You can feel sharper, stronger, and more in control. But it starts with paying attention to the everyday choices that no one else sees. Like reheating that plate of leftovers. I believe in you. I believe that you deserve to age with dignity, with energy, and with your memories intact. That's why I do what I do. And that's why I hope this video made you feel not just informed, but hopeful. Before you go, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Zenior Life, and click the notification bell so you never miss another simple, science-backed tip for aging gracefully. And if this video helped you, let me know by typing 1 in the comments. If it didn't quite hit the mark, type 0. I read every response and use your feedback to create even better videos just for you. If you'd like to dive deeper into more senior-safe cooking tips and brain-boosting foods, be sure to watch the video I've linked right here on the screen. Trust me, it's filled with easy, delicious ways to protect your mind and body without giving up the foods you love. Until next time, take care of your plate, your brain, and your beautiful self. You're worth it. You've come so far, and there's so much life ahead. Let's make it healthy, happy, and stroke-free, together. Dr. Linda Rose.